Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Felicia and this is The Feminine Fancy. In today's video, we are going to talk about the books that have impacted my life significantly. I love reading, you guys. Unfortunately, this year I was not able to read as much as I typically do just because of working full time and running my channel. It really is something that you have to set aside time to do, though Audible comes in clutch. So Audible, if you're watching, I would love to work with you. I thought it would be fun, since we're heading towards the end of the year, to talk about some of the books that have positively impacted my life, changed my life, and just helped me live a more fulfilled, peaceful, and understanding existence. And we'll get into that a little bit later, the whole understanding part. Before we get into it, go ahead and hit that red subscribe button and the notifications bell so that you can join our online community. It would mean so much to me. It costs absolutely nothing. And go ahead and follow me on Instagram at _thefemininefancy_. Okay, let's get into it. I don't have the physical copies of all of the books. Most of them are back at my mom's house, but I do have one. But for the ones that I don't have, I will just put a picture here so you know what book I'm talking about. Okay, so the first book that I have to talk about is Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman by Dixie Andelin Forsyth. This video is actually sponsored by Fascinating Womanhood. When they reached out to me to ask if I'd like to collaborate, I was so excited because I love their YouTube channel. They have so much good advice for relationships, for embodying your feminine energy and how to bring out that masculine energy in your partner if you have one, or even how to attract masculine energy into your life. So they have so much good content over there on their channel. I will link it down below. But when they asked me to read and review their book for this video, I was just absolutely thrilled. Reading the book, the first half kind of reminds me of Princess Lessons by Meg Cabot. Meg Cabot is the woman who wrote The Princess Diaries, and she had, I don't have it with me, it's at my mom's house, but I'll put a picture up here. She wrote a sort of etiquette, charm, grace, hair, makeup book from the perspective of Paolo, who was Mia's hair and makeup guy in the movie. And I loved that book growing up. And this book reminds me a lot of that one in the first half because Dixie talks about charm, she talks about femininity, tenderness, even blushing and your handshake. Like, she really goes in depth talking about some of the more traditional feminine qualities, and I really appreciated that. And then towards the second half of the book, she starts to talk more in depth about relationships, masculinity, and how men and women really need each other. So I really feel like it's a great combination of talking about the traditional feminine qualities as well as traditional masculine qualities in a way that sort of showcases how they help each other, how they benefit each other, how they impact each other. It's really a great read. I will say that this book is for a very, very traditional woman. However, I do think that even if you don't consider yourself traditional, or if you consider yourself more modern, there are great lessons to be learned, and there are things that you can implement into your own relationship that will more than likely make your relationship stronger. This book is actually a sequel from the first Fascinating Womanhood book, which was written by Dixie's mother, Helen Andelin, and that book sold like wildfire. If you're like me and you like sort of like vintage things, pick up that book as well to read the original, and then grab this one by Helen's daughter, Dixie. And while you're at it, head to their channel, watch some of their videos. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate both women over at Fascinating Womanhood, Dixie and her daughter Cherry. They've been so sweet to me. I have even reached out to Dixie for relationship advice in my own life, and she's been so incredibly helpful and sweet. And so I was so thrilled when I got this book, and I absolutely love it. So I will leave the link in the description box below for you to grab this one. But again, it is called Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman. On the topic of relationships and books that have impacted my relationship positively, the next book I want to talk about is called Marry Him: The Case for Settling for Mr. Good Enough. Now, I know what you're thinking. I don't want to settle. I don't believe in settling and all of that. And I understand and I hear you. I hear you, but honestly, I loved this book. I read it this year. Well, I listened to it on Audible. And it was actually one of the few books I listened to where I didn't absolutely despise the narrator's like voice. I don't know. I was talking about this at my holiday party the other night. Like, sometimes listening to a book on Audible is so hard because the narrator just makes it so difficult. This one was actually really, really great and easy to listen to, and she did a great job reading it. But yes, I loved this book. Basically, the premise of the book is that the author, who I also follow on Instagram, what's her name? Lori Gottlieb. She talks about waking up at like 40, deciding to have a child on her own because she's not married and she's like not seeing anyone. And then she wrote a think piece about it, and she got all these comments back, both positive and negative. And some of the comments were calling her selfish. Some of the comments were saying, I feel sorry for your son, and things like that. And so she started to think about, you know, how she approached dating and how she approached selecting a partner, and how she ended up at the point where she was in her 40s and deciding to have a child on her own. Now, of course, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that decision, but it was really interesting to hear her talk through some of the decisions that she made as a woman that kind of got her to that point. And then also within the book, she also interviews different people. So there was like a group of, she interviews a group of 30-something women and a group of 20-something aged women. The 20-somethings, they are just listing off all of these things that are like, oh, I would never look at him, I would never look at him, like, I'm not interested in a guy like that. And then when she's talking with the 30-somethings, you know, they're talking about how like, yeah, my husband might not have a six-pack, but like, he's super sweet. Or like, yeah, my husband's not like 6'3", but you know, he cares about me and he takes care of me and he loves me, you know. And she also tells anecdotal stories from different women. And one of the stories that resonated with me and made me feel so sad was this story about this young woman. I think in the book her name is Jessica, I can't remember. She tells the story about how this young woman, she was like 23, she was in a wonderful relationship with her partner, but she felt the pressure from society telling her like, you can't get, you know, you can't settle down now, like you're only 22, you're only 23, you need to, you know, you need to go out, you need to explore and see, you know, find out what you like and all of those things that we hear all the time. And she broke up with her boyfriend, even though she wasn't not in love with him, and she didn't not want to be with him. She just felt this pressure from society. And it had been like 2-3 years, and even after she broke up with him, she was still feeling like that was a huge mistake, like the biggest mistake of her life. And she reached back out to him, but by the time she reached back out to him, he was engaged or he was married, and she was just crushed and heartbroken. And I just think it's really interesting. And again, like, I'm not one to say like, oh, you should settle for someone you're not interested in, or you should settle for someone you're not, you know, attracted to or whatever. But I do think it's an interesting conversation around the sort of standards that we set as women and where we place importance, and the things that we value when looking for relational partners. And I was actually talking to my brother on the phone about this last night because Jamila Jamil, who I love from watching The Good Place, she posted on her Instagram a post about Tom Holland and Zendaya, and like posing the question, like, why are all of these media outlets forcing these two young people to talk about their height difference? Like, who cares? It's no different to, if a woman says, I'm not gonna date a guy who's below, you know, who's below 6 feet tall, that's no different to a man saying, well, I'm not gonna date a woman who weighs this much, you know? Like, judging your relationship partner based off of sort of some of these physical attributes is just highly like prejudicial. And so I was talking about it with my brother last night, and we just got into a good conversation that I think we might actually like film a video together and put on the channel. Comment down below if you'd be interested in that. But we got into a conversation about it, and I was just saying, I think that it's difficult for people to separate what they see in movies and what they see, you know, like on social media and things like that, and it's difficult for them to look at that and not assume that that's also their story and their life, right? We're talking about how interesting it is that so many women say like, oh, I want a man who's 6 feet or over 6 feet tall, when the national average height for men is 5'9", and at most 5'10", but if you look it up on Google, it says 5'9". So that means that every woman who's requiring that their partner be 6 feet tall is requiring them to be above average in an area that they can't control. And so it's things like that she talks about in the book, and how that can lend itself to, you know, then as you get closer to 30 or as you're in your 30s, you start to put value on other things. You start to value height less and value job security more. It's really interesting. It's a hilarious read. I think it's a good reminder to be realistic about the standards that you set for your relationship, and I really loved it. That is another book that positively impacted my life and my relationship this year. Okay, I can't talk about books without talking about the defining decade, and the reason why I'm going to talk about it again is because I do have a significant, I do have more subscribers now than I did when I first talked about this, so I will include it in this list. If you've been around this channel for a while, you've already heard my spiel about the defining decade, so if you want to skip past this part, go ahead. Another book that impacted my life significantly was The Defining Decade, and I actually think I'm going to read it again because I was watching a YouTube video where this young man was referencing the book, and he was referencing an element that the author talks about that I totally forgot about, and I was like, oh, it is time to reread it. That book impacted my life so much, and I've told the story before about how I would listen to it every day while I was on the train going into a job in San Francisco that I just absolutely hated, and so much of what she said in that book resonated with me. The idea of building identity capital, the idea of making the most of your 20s and not sort of wasting this time and throwing it away as if it doesn't matter. I think, and this is sort of the whole premise of the book, is that we are told this messaging that you can do whatever you want in your 20s, like your 20s are your fun time, and to an extent, like, yeah, that is true, but to say that the choices that you make in your 20s are not going to affect the rest of your life or your 30s or 40s is just simply not true. The choices that you make in this decade are very important, and I think that people who get offended by that are people who didn't do a lot in their 20s, or who maybe didn't take advantage of that time the way that they could have, because there have been moments where I've talked about this book and I've gotten pushback, I think, sometimes on, you know, ideas behind building identity capital, or, you know, just the book in general. And I don't think anything in this book is meant to be negative or is meant to shame anyone. I think the whole premise of the book is to say, hey, this is an important time for you. This is a time where you are, you know, potentially finding your life partner. You're working on figuring out who you are in terms of your career and the kind of job you want to have, and you don't have to have it all figured out, but you are figuring it out during this time. And also she talks a lot about like having jobs during your 20s that don't go anywhere, and that the reason why we experience so much sadness and depression is because of lack of purpose, because we're working these jobs just to make ends meet, but we don't really have true passion or true focus. And so it's a wonderfully written book, and I seriously recommend it for anyone who is in your 20s, even if you're not. I think that reading the book, really thinking about some of the topics that she brings up, regardless, even if you're not in your 20s, you can still implement them in your life. So The Defining Decade is one of my favorite books, and I credit that book for the success of my channel, for just pretty much everything. Because it really helped me realize, like, oh, this is the time to sort of get focused and, you know, work on things. And so I really appreciate the author, Meg J, for writing that book. And yeah, it's another good one. And the final book that I want to talk about is The Heart of Buddha's Teaching, Transforming Suffering into Peace, Joy, and Liberation. I started reading this book last year during quarantine, when okay, comment down below if quarantine was like a mentally overactive time for you as well. Like, I think because we were all at home, we weren't super busy, like there wasn't much to do. It gave an opportunity for us overthinkers to overthink twice as much. In that time, I was overthinking like a crazy person. I was thinking about so much, thinking about why this didn't work out, why this happened the way it did, and I needed something to help me calm my mind, and this book did just that. I don't know much about Buddhism. I don't know much about Buddha, but what I do know is this book gives a lot of tangible things that you can do to calm your mind and to help you recognize that, you know, a lot of times, and you've probably heard me say this on the channel before, but a lot of times we create our own suffering by sort of choosing to think about the things that caused us suffering, if that makes sense. And the book gives you ways that you can combat that. You can live in a way where your mind is not taking over your entire life. And I remember one of the things that I really held on to in that book is the concept of habit energy and acknowledging your habit energy when it comes up. So for example, if you have a habit of thinking about something that makes you really upset or makes you really anxious, when that thought comes up, you can just address it as, oh, this is my habit energy. Because at some point, when you are overthinking and when you're thinking of things over and over and over again, it is a habit. It becomes a habit that you have to break. And the best way that you can break it is by acknowledging it and then sort of just moving on. There are a lot of little things like that that really helped me, and I have been able to take the lessons that I learned from that book and bring them into, 2021 and implement some of those tips and some of those, tricks and ways in which I can focus my energy differently. I haven't read anything else from this author, but I have heard really, really wonderful things about his books and his sort of teachings as well. So I will link that book as well as some of the other books from him down below as well. All right, my loves, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm sorry there are not more books on this list. I genuinely did not have a chance to read a lot this year, and if I did, it was like via Audible. And I did a lot of fiction reading this year, so I'm sorry. Hopefully next year I will be able to read a lot more. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and also leave your book recommendations in the comment section below, because I will want to go through them and I will want to see which books that you guys loved as well. Thank you so much to Fascinating Womanhood for sponsoring today's video. Again, check out their channel. I will link it in the description box below. You can find me on Instagram at _thefemininefancy_ and on my blog at thefemininefancy.com. And don't forget to hit that red subscribe button and join our online community. I love you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.